New York is heavy on going electric. A mandate from a couple of years ago requires schools to run electric school buses soon. But Republican state lawmakers use this week to say pump the brakes. And we learn more with 7 News reporter Lexi Bruning.
State Republican lawmakers are pumping the brakes on a state mandate requiring schools to shift gears and turn green.
It is becoming more and more clear that meeting the mandate, both the initial aspects of the transition as well as the full length of a full electric fleet, really is nearly impossible.
The 2022 mandate requires all new school bus purchases in New York State to be electric by 2027. By 2035, 100% of the bus fleet must be electric. And don't forget, schools will need new infrastructure to plug the buses in. We checked in with Indian River Superintendent Troy Decker about the change in September. His concern then, and still now, the cost.
It's on the order of 200% more money. So again, more than double the cost.
Republican state lawmakers are listening to superintendents like Decker. They introduced a new piece of legislation in the Assembly and Senate, which would delay the fully electric mandate by 10 years to 2045. It would also require a cost analysis for school districts. Assemblyman Scott Gray says it's ironic school districts are being asked to go electric by 2035 when state heavy-duty vehicles don't have to go green until 2040.
We should be doing everything that we expect from all other levels of government and school districts. We should be doing it first.
Assembly Minority Leader Will Barclay is co-sponsoring the bill.
Is uneconomical, and secondly, we can't do it logistically.
Assemblyman Ken Blankenbush calls the mandate a poor policy, saying electric buses don't have the mile capacity or energy for large areas and winter climates. In a statement to 7 News, the governor's office says $500 million is set aside for zero-emission school buses, part of the Environmental Bond Act. It says Governor Hochul is working with communities to allocate the funds. Lexi Bruning, 7 News.